Hi, I'm Dave Morehouse, and I want to welcome you to this coordinate remote viewing audio training program. At this point, as I introduce you to this course, I really want to let you know about what to expect. I know you're sitting there wondering, you're looking at this beautifully packaged and prepared kit from Sounds True, and you're beginning to have some thoughts. They're not odd thoughts, they're the same kind of thoughts that everyone has. They're thoughts like, can I really do this? What did I get myself into? Do I have what it takes to ever be any good at this? Or is this even, in fact, real? So let me assuage these thoughts to a degree before we get started. So first you should know that well over 14,000 other individuals have found themselves sitting right here, just as you are right now, and thinking exactly the same kinds of thoughts that you are thinking. These are intelligent human beings, just like you, that have made a decision to move forward in their lives to see if there really is something outside the physical. I wanted to give you some of the demographics of these individuals. Just for example, out of 14,500 plus individuals, we have 3,800 plus engineers that have come to us from various disciplines. Disciplines like electrical, mechanical, civil, even a NASA rocket scientist has learned how to become a molecular. There have been 2,900 plus physicians. These are MDs and DOs, and then into that mix also there are nurses, medical technicians, chiropractors, etc. To continue with this demographic, there are approximately 2,000 law enforcement personnel who have come through this particular training. These are cops that really want to know that this still small voice inside that says, do this and don't do that. Cops understand in very real terms that the old cops are the ones that follow their intuition, that follow their gut, and they've stayed alive by doing that. They come to this training because they want to know now really what that is. I'll tell you a story. We had an individual who was an undercover narcotics officer. This individual came into class and he introduced himself. Most people can look at it about him. It's an undercover narcotics cop, but I know what he's doing in his class. And as he got through this introduction, a couple of days into the training, he one time standing outside the classroom shared with other students story about why he was doing and he told a story about the fact that they were going to take down a crack house and they had pulled up their vehicles and were getting out of the vehicles and they were looking through the kitchen window and they could see the people up there in the kitchen and they were bagging up crack cocaine and they thought, okay, they're bagging it up, here we go, and they all had guns around them and they knocked the door down. As they came inside, there was a young woman that came out of the kitchen, and as she came out of the kitchen, they were bagging up the drugs. She had a 12-gauge shotgun in her hand, and she raised the 12-gauge shotgun up and pointed it at the police officer. And the police officer, with his weapon in the ready and his partner on his right-hand side, he said, in that instant, there became this slowing down of time for me. I reached this secret position of awareness. Shoot. There's a 12-gauge shotgun barrel pointed at me right now. I'm supposed to shoot. I'm shooting. I'm supposed to shoot. getting out of the van, getting ready to come into the house, and she said, I was bringing the shotgun around and I was going to throw it under the sofa because I didn't want any of the guys in the kitchen to get the shotgun and try to use it against the police. So it was an entirely innocent process by this woman and the child behind her. And so you have this undercover narcotics sergeant who is saying to himself, I have to know where that voice came from. I've had all kinds of things happen to me throughout my police career that said, don't do this or do that or follow my gut or follow my instincts, and I've used that term and all of my police friends talk about those kinds of things from time to time, but I really want to know where that came from and what that is. And that's why he was in remote viewing training. That may be why you're here now in remote viewing training. So thousands of law enforcement officials have come into this. Everyone from undercover narcotics cops all the way up to fire investigators and back and forth across the spectrum of law enforcement. At one point in time, there was even a discussion by me to go to England and to train inspectors at Scotland Yard in the techniques of remote viewing. And we pulled away from that and did not honor that contract because they were trying to take those inspectors and carve them out away from the general population of Scotland Yard and turn them into considered an anomaly that was set aside. So what I'm all about in this, what I hope you really understand about this, is what we're trying to do here is make this part of the legions of the status quo, not something that is unique to a special select group of human beings that have been shot in the head or have near-death experiences or had some other self-proclaimed psychic ability that they've now decided that they're going to come and more viewing to support. I want you to know that each and every one of you have this ability, from cops to doctors to NASA rocket scientists to homemakers. It's all there. We've had 1,800 plus educators from all levels, from university professors of physics to kindergarten and preschool teachers. We've even had Montessori school owners from the eastern coast of the United States that have come to this training to learn this so that they could take it back and empower the youth of this planet with this awareness that they were physically. Rather than playing a role to continue to shut them down and tell them that they should not honor this awareness that there is something physically. You know, there was a time when I was teaching emotional history, and I was telling this group about how human beings develop this non-physical side of and as I was relating that, I was talking, in fact, about drawing some parallels to the ability of how we see and learn to see physically. We're born into this existence, and we have this mass of swirling, dark, abstract forms and shapes which moves, and then we believe that that ultimately finds its way into the formation of distinct contrast between light and dark, which then takes on shape, which then takes on texture, which then takes on proportionate perspective and ultimately color. And then, of course, we're able to see perfectly as we see now with our adult physical eyes, those of us that are gifted with sight. And a Swedish pediatrician raised his hand up and said, well, no, that's not how we believe entirely we see when we are born into this existence. We believe when we're born into this existence that, in fact, we see perfectly. And that the adaptation or the acquisition of physical sight is just another piece of physical development, but we're actually born into this existence seeing perfectly. And I asked him to clarify that in class. What do you mean, see perfectly? He had this hand and arm circle. He took his fingers together and said, closed behind us when we're born into this existence. And so young children know things like love without having had to have been told what it is supposed to be. They know things that are positive and things that are negative without having lived life being told, educated as to what is and what is not. They understand the non look at this, when you learn this, you start to what am I going to do if I'm the person in poverty? How am I going to crush my personal story with this gift in life that I'm crushing? You know, and the hundreds of other gifts that you're doing. What are you going to do to become your personal poverty? When you lay down to a roadmap, how can you make a difference in a child's life? How can you allow a child to know absolutely, irrefutably, undeniably, unequivocally that they are more than the physical, and that they don't have to be limited, that they don't have to be told that there is no possibility, that the world around them is a world of absolutes, and we know in absolute terms that the world around them is a world of laws and approximations in the world of physics, and that they can become anything that they choose to become, that anything on the other side of the moon is possible for them. Think then how you might honor that approach that all of these wonderful gifted teachers, educators, one example is my mom was one of the two Montessori schools has opened up to members this desire that's in them to really stay connected to what was on the other side of the veil as they came. Think how different this world will become when we're able to raise a generation of young people recognizing absolutely that there is something physical. Think how different this world will become. So to continue this question then that you may be having within yourself of, can I do this? Well, let's talk about failures. Let's talk about people that have not completed this kind of program. Out of 14,500 plus individuals that have undergone this training in the past few years, there have only been 2 individuals that have not become successful at it. Now, I want to be really clear about these 2 individuals. One of them was a United States Navy SEAL who came to me at the end of training on the first day and said, you know, this is not for me. You see, he was under the impression that what he was really going to get out of this is that it was going to kind of turn him into this super killer diller, that he was going to be able to use what he learned in remote viewing to really empower him to do his job better. And you can't fault him for that. But what he started to see in the classroom and in the instruction was that this was really looking well beyond just the capability of the tool. This was really looking at the tool, how to bring about difference in the individual, how to bring about difference in the transformation in the collective whole of the human condition. We were really looking forward in those ways, and he was recognizing that that wasn't really going to meet his needs and expectations, and so it was a self-imposed failure. At the end of the first day, he walked out of the class and did not come back, and that is a failure, and I count that against the 14,500. There was one more, which was a young man by the name of Wolf, who was an engineering student and an engineering student. That's the reason that there are so many engineers in this training, is because it's such a dogma, a discipline, a formulaic approach to being able to see distant in space-time. It's really a structured protocol that you're going to be learning with this tool called coordinated remote viewing. So engineers like it because it is such a formulaic approach, and he liked it, and he was capable of doing it. But what started to happen is, I noticed that he started to shut down as he got through the first week of training, and he came back into the refresher course and he started to shut down again. He came back again and shut down again further. And it got to the point where, as he would do each session, all target sessions, I remember instruction, is he would say, I can see began to feed on the energy that was being given back to him. Do you understand? He really started to So when we kind of caught on to this and we pulled him to the side and said, you can't do this, come on, you have to stop telling people you're not seeing and allow yourself to start seeing again. And then when he caught on and recognized with our help what was happening and what he was doing, he stopped this self-fulfilling prophecy of not seeing and he got back into the loop again to see. But those are the only 2 failures out of 14,500 people who have ever stepped up and said, it's not working for me, I can't see. Otherwise, if you're willing to step back and honor this quest that you have to know that there was something more than physical, I promise you this, if you will follow the protocols as we teach them, you will see systems be safe. And you will be able to detect and decode information through the use of this audio training program. You will be able to see a target distance in space-time, and you will be able to come back and say, I saw that, I perceived this, I smelled that, I tasted this, I heard that, I felt this, I saw that color, I heard that sound, I felt that temperature. All of those things you will see in level 1 and level 2. One final time. Stop trying to learn. And this is always a self-imposed condition that's brought on by some increasingly effective form of self-doubt. So if you'll just do what Uncle Dave tells you to do, if you'll just follow the protocols that we're going to teach you in this audio program, you're going to do this. The flip side of this is that you'll not fail if you follow the instructions and learn every aspect of the protocols of this most highly classified intelligence methodology. Now I want to talk for just a minute about highly classified. That ends up being a turn-off for some people. Some people think about, what did I get myself into here? I have this guy that's a career military officer, part of the CIA for 5 years, got shot in the head, recruited into the training program, and I learned this remote viewing process. And now I bought this program, and I'm sitting here, and I'm going to be fed a piece of information that comes from the Central Intelligence Agency, and that sometimes is a really creepy thing to do. So let's talk about it. First, let's define what it is, and we'll take it outside of the military context. The Department of Defense, particularly the CIA, defined this phenomenon as the learned ability to transcend space and time through persons, places, or things remote in space and time, and to gather and get things. The first time I ever heard that, it just made the terror stand up on the back of my neck. So here I was, an ex-Ranger, company commander, career military officer, special operations infantryman, and I am being brought into this organization, which I'll tell you about later, but I'm sitting there listening to a man who is the program manager responsible for this particular organization, and I say to him, I don't really know what it is you do here, and he says to me those words that I just shared with you. Young man, what we do here is select and train individuals to transcend space and time, to be persons, places, or things remote in space and time, and to gather and report intelligence information on the same. Now, let me tell you what it really is, and more the context of how we teach remote viewing, and how we will be teaching remote viewing in this audio training program. Remote viewing is the learned ability to use 2 inherent keystone activities. So you will use these 2 kinesthetic activities to detect and decode 4-dimensional waveform data, and you will decode it into coherent 3-dimensional thought form, and you will further objectify that 2-dimensional media. Thereby, you will report it in 2-dimensional media by sketching it, textual sketches, right? Or you will write words which capture color, temperature, texture, taste, smell, sound, etc. So again, it is the process of detecting and decoding 4-dimensional waveform data. 4 dimensions defined as 3 dimensions of space. Segment entitled "The Physics of the Metaphysics." 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time. You are detecting and decoding that into coherent 3-dimensional sight or conceptual illusion of sight or conceptual illusion of sound, smell, and taste. And you objectify that by writing it down according to the structure of coordinate remote viewing. You will write it down, sketch 4 words, capturing it into this audio set, even if you have a set of headphones on, from the speakers and the headphones to your ears, there is invisible waveform that is moving, four-dimensional waveform, 3 dimensions of space, 1 of time, that is moving invisibly across the room, and your ears are hearing it, and your brain is electrochemically decoding that waveform data, and it is decoding it into coherent 3-dimensional thought form you call sound. And you are hearing language which you understand. If I were speaking in a language that you did not understand, you would not be able to decode that. You would have to rely then upon other things to help you understand what it was I was talking about. You would have to call upon another ability that each of you possesses, which is simply using.
Thank you. This was the best horse.